Another day, another twisted Florida man, as they say. The Investigative Bureau and our junior detectives have been hard at work to bring you all the best of NRC's chaos in quiz-style formatting. In this video series, you'll be given a wacky headline with a bit of fabricated backstory before being presented with 3 possible suspects. You'll then have a bit of quiz-style thinking time to determine who you think is responsible for the scenario, and once that's over, I'll reveal who actually did it and why. Some of our lovely community members have also offered up their own stories as well. So as always, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our junior detectives for their submissions, regardless of whether they have been featured here. Your creativity is inspiring. If you happen to feel inspired during this video as well and want to submit a story of your own, please fill out the form linked in the description below for a chance to be featured in a future video. Since all stories are fabricated, spoilers for EN server story content will be light, if it exists at all. Now then, let's start with our very first headline, submitted by Blue Moon U2s. What tale do you have for us today? NRC student found sleeping in Hartstable's rose bushes. House Warden Rosehearts demands repercussions. Last night, an NRC student was found asleep in the Hartstable rose bushes by House Warden Rosehearts. Outraged, Rosehearts demanded the student be given detention for disturbing the growth of the rose bushes, crushing some of the petals, and apparently breaking 3 separate rules in Hartstable's very long list. The NRC student was embarrassed and did not make any comment, but it is unknown if that was due to genuine remorse or fear of evoking further fury from the raging House Warden. Our suspects in this case are Silver, who had a study session set up in Hartstable with Riddle, Rook, who was allegedly meeting with Trey to discuss something about the science club, and Ace, who has been known to hide in bushes from time to time to avoid Riddle's wrath. Who done it? I feel like the obvious answer here is Silver, but I also don't think Riddle would be all that mad at him because he knows about Silver's sleepy spells due to their shared club. Rook would be a little interesting of a choice here, but I also don't think that Riddle would punish someone from a different dorm for breaking Hartstable's rules. Therefore, the only one left to blame is Ace, but let's see what our junior detective had to say. According to their report, the culprit was in fact Ace. When Riddle paused his study session with Silver to quickly check in on his beloved rose bushes, he was shocked and outraged to find none other than Ace snoozing peacefully inside them. The outrage stemmed mostly from the fact that earlier in the day, Ace was apparently supposed to receive a collaring after Riddle discovered that Ace didn't receive a good grade on his latest History of Magic exam. Ace had fled, fearing the collar's wrath, and decided to hide in one of the dorm's rose bushes. Deuce later found him and attempted to scold the heart card soldier, but Ace dismissed Deuce and said that he would get out as soon as Deuce came back and told him that Riddle had calmed down. Deuce left, but then forgot to come back and inform Ace, so the boy ended up falling asleep out of boredom, compounding his already expected punishment. Thank you so much, Blue Moon U2s, for your lovely report. But now it is time for our next headline. NRC student scales campus fence to flee PE class, receives remedial lessons. During an otherwise normal afternoon while Vargas was teaching his PE class, he noticed one of his students running away from the sports field. Had it been an endurance training day, the distance runner would have brought a tear to the coach's eye with their determined, sweaty running, but today was a flight lesson and none of the warm-ups required such an activity. When he called out to the student, they began to run even faster, which is when Vargas realized they were attempting to flee the lesson. A quick pursuit of the skipper led the pair up to the school's main gate, where the student, fearing their punishment, scaled the fence to flee the school grounds. Vargas was impressed by their frantic climb, but nevertheless ran through the open gate to catch them on the other side. While the student was commended for their effort, they were still made to return to class and were required to take additional remedial flight lessons as punishment for their escape attempt. Our suspects in this case are Azul, who doesn't like flying, Iria, who doesn't like flying, or Floyd, who doesn't really care for flying. Who done it? In this case, it was none other than Floyd who was attempting to flee the field. While the Octa Trio on the whole aren't fans of flight, Floyd is the least afraid of the activity, so it surprised Vargas that he, of all people, was running away. What the coach didn't know was that Floyd was bored, and a bored Floyd seeks out entertainment. And that day, the edge of the woods surrounding the field seemed like a good place to goof around. How long would it take the lobster to realize he was gone? What sort of things would he find hidden amongst the trees? Maybe he could even sneak in a nap, all were the alleged thoughts of a Floyd. But when Vargas began to pursue the eel, Floyd viewed this as an exciting opportunity to go toe-to-toe with his teacher, and thus the race began. Being partial to parkour, Floyd hopped the fence, hoping Vargas would follow suit to see how the muscular man would attempt such a feat, but was disappointed when Vargas instead ran through the open gate. This took all the fun out of the pursuit, and so Floyd allowed himself to be caught, receiving both praise and punishment with an indifferent expression. Our next headline was submitted by Junior Detective Firesar Utnainhi, and their story is NRC Arm Wrestling Showdown Gets Upended in Tremendous Upset. One day in the Savannah Claw dorm lounge, several of the strongest students were testing their might in a good old arm wrestling competition, hoping to win 100 thaw marks and some bragging rights. The contest attracted 16 students from across campus, the perfect amount for a proper bracket tournament, which eventually came down to Leona and Malleus, who were just about dead even. Both were straining in a ferocious stalemate until a full minute into the showdown, another contestant stormed in. They placed their hand on top of both Leona and Malleus's and with great effort slammed them down so hard they not only pinned the other's fists down but broke the table too. The culprit left a very shocked audience, including a flabbergasted Leona and a gaping Malleus as they marched off, head held high and smirking like a cat who got the cream. Our suspects in this case are Jack, who was eager to test himself and wanted to prove himself to Leona, Trey, who had a long day of chasing down rule breakers, or Apple, who just got back from being educated on beauty by Vil. Who done it? You know, I don't think that Jack would break up the competition on principle, but I do think it would be super shocking if either Epple or Trey came in and won this fight. So I'm a bit unsure of who is responsible here. So let's turn it over to our junior detective to find out the truth. According to their report, it was in fact Epple who had won this bracket by proxy. He apparently had been so done with everything that he took this opportunity to take out his frustrations, and take them out he did. After all, the poor kid had just been subjected to Vil overblotting, losing the SDC, continued lessons on beauty, and most recently, a massive headache. Upon seeing this wrestling match in a stalemate, Epple took matters into his own hands and let every ounce of built-up frustration erupt on the spot. All while slamming down Leona and Malleus's hands, he apparently shouted, "I'm done with y'alls!" Though Epple has a few splinters from the smashing, he reportedly has zero regrets. Vil had to admit that Epple did deserve some accolades for such a feat of strength, but warned Epple not to do something like this again without his knowledge. However, Vil's chastising fell on deaf ears, as Epple was too busy glowing at his little victory and outdoing two of the heaviest hitters in the whole academy. The only punishment Epple got was the aforementioned Vil scolding and the task of preparing the table. Once done, Epple skipped off to Crisp and Dips for a nice greasy treat. Thank you so much, Firestar Utnainhi, for this wonderful tale. But now it is time for our next headline. NRC student finds alchemy goggles atop head after reporting them missing. During an alchemy lab, Professor Carell was approached by a concerned student who lamented that they may be unable to finish the assignment because their goggles had gone missing. Without that protective equipment, it would be too dangerous for them to tend to their cauldron, and even though they had a lab partner, the student was worried it'd be unfair to let them do all the work in their stead. Rather than ask to be excused from the exercise entirely, the student asked if the professor had any extra goggles that Carell could lend them so they could continue to help. The question caused the professor to still his tongue because until that point, Carell had assumed the student was trying to pull a prank since their missing goggles were sitting right on top of their head. When told this, the student laughed off the incident and returned to their lab, puzzling the professor, but Carell shrugged off the encounter as an eccentricity and went back to monitoring his lab. Our suspects in this case are Ace, who may have been goofing off with Deuce during class, Kaleem, who is known to misplace things from time to time, or Apple, who may have needed to tussle for some ingredients and thusly got distracted. Who done it? In this case, it was in fact Kaleem who had reported the missing goggles to Professor Carell. Typically, Kaleem wears his goggles around his neck and then pulls them up whenever he needs them, but his lab mates that day suggested he try keeping them on top of his head instead. This way, it'd take a little less time to slip them on and off since that day's experiment required a lot of additions, but those ingredients needed to be spaced out in 5-minute intervals. Kaleem agreed and was fine for the first couple of changes, but then he got distracted writing something down. When he was done writing, he instinctively went to grab the goggles around his neck but found them to be missing. Since they weren't anywhere he could see and his lab partner was busy adding the next ingredient, he went over to Carell to report them as missing before requesting a replacement pair. The incident was thankfully quickly rectified by Carell pointing out that the goggles were in fact on top of Kaleem's head, and class went back to normal shortly thereafter. Our next headline was submitted by Junior Detective Wendy Van Mourik, who is reporting on the tale, NRC cafeteria ghost threatens to quit after massive kitchen meltdown. During the morning preparations, one of the ghosts working in the cafeteria saw that the whole kitchen was a complete mess. The chaos would take hours to clean, hours they didn't have if they were to get lunch prepared on time. The ghost quickly informed NRC staff, threatening to quit if nothing was done, and an investigation was launched to find and punish the folks who had made the mess the night before. Luckily, a fire fairy saw 2 people in the kitchen at the time of the accident, and their reluctant testimony allowed our suspects to be caught. Speaking of those suspects, the ones we have in this case are Ace and Cater, Kaleem and Floyd, or Silver and Edia. Who done it? I don't think the Hartsable kiddos would have been in the cafeteria that late at night since they have a kitchen in their dorm, but all the other combinations feel a little out of pocket, so let's turn it over to our junior detective to discern the truth. According to their report, the culprits here were Silver and Edia. Silver apparently wanted to escape Lilia's cooking, so he decided to make some light snacks by using the cafeteria kitchen, not knowing that Edia was also there. Edia had been testing out various sorts of coffee and tea to see which would be most effective in keeping him up for his late-night gaming sessions, despite Ortho advising him otherwise. Edia panicked when Silver showed up, and Silver became defensive, ready to fight this mysterious foe. Unfortunately, by the time they recognized each other, the kitchen was a mess. Edia had run off right after he recognized Silver, and Silver suffered from a sleepy spell, so neither had the time or wherewithal to clean up their mess. Both were reprimanded, given detention, and made to clean the kitchen from top to bottom while being supervised by the kitchen ghosts and Professor Train. Thank you, Wendy Van Mourik, for your lovely report, but it is time to move on to our next headline. Visitors shocked to find NRC student among plush toys in campus mystery shop. A large influx of visitors during the spring culture fair meant an influx of customers to the mystery shop. Sam was quite pleased to have the extra business until a child ran over to ask him if they could buy the cat while pointing to a pile of plush animals. The shopkeep responded by telling the child that they could of course have one of the plushies if their parent or guardian was alright with purchasing it. This response only angered the child, who doubled down by allegedly saying, "No, the real kitty cat, the one sleeping over there." When Sam went to inspect the pile, he and a few other shoppers were startled to find a real creature hiding among the plush ones, sleeping soundly in the pile. The child was promptly told that the cat was the shop's and wasn't for sale, which seemed to satisfy their curiosity. Once the child left, Sam quickly woke up the sleeping creature and asked them to leave the shop. Though the culprit was cranky at having their nap interrupted, they did comply and left the shop soon after. Our suspects in this case are Lucius, who may not technically be a student, but he is an adorable cat; Grim, who isn't technically a cat, but is a student; or Leona, who is technically both a student and a cat, albeit a big cat. Who done it? In this case, it was in fact Grim who had decided to sleep amongst the plushies. He and the prefect had stopped by the shop to pick up a couple essentials, but they weren't expecting the crowds, so it was taking quite a while to get everything they came for. The line was also rather long, so Grim decided that if he was going to be stuck in the shop for an extended period of time, he might as well be comfortable. Therefore, he decided that the plush pile would be his makeshift couch, since he could blend in easily enough and the plushies were soft. But the comfort quickly consumed him and he fell asleep shortly after sitting down, which is where the child eventually found him. Due to the crowd and Grim's camouflage, the prefect was unable to find him inside the shop, so they assumed he had gone outside and was calling for him out there. Thankfully, Sam was able to wake the dire beast and usher him out of the store with minimal disruption to the rest of the guests. You gave Grim a small lecture for the stunt, but the dire beast ignored their words and instead lamented about being woken up from such a good nap. Sam later moved the display up higher to reduce the chances of a repeat incident. Our next headline was submitted by Junior Detective Soul K.C, who is reporting on the case. NRC campus suffers animal voice outbreak. Out of nowhere, a bunch of students started to speak not with words, but calls and growls of various animals. This outbreak made its way all over the entire campus, from the classrooms to the dorms, with the noises ranging from croaking frogs and gorilla grunts to loud lion roars and elephant trumpets. Thankfully, Professor Carell was able to whip up an antidote and return everyone's voices to normal. An investigation was launched, but pinpointing the culprit proved difficult since each of the affected students had different opinions on when and how they were jinxed. Some suspected a potion had gone awry, while others accused their classmates of adding something to their food during meals. The outbreak picked back up later that day, this time with everyone affected making more embarrassing sounds like tweets, squeaks, and chirps. Eventually, you brought forth some evidence, and the perpetrator, as well as their accomplices, were reprimanded and forced to manage the botanical garden for a solid month, as well as extra alchemy lessons as punishment for the stunt. Our suspects in this case are Lilia, who was cackling during the entire incident and recording everything; Floyd, who was reported to have been fiddling around with Mostro Lounge ingredients; or Apple, who had been handing out surplus apples his family had sent him. Who done it? Honestly, I'm tempted to blame Floyd, but that's low-hanging fruit, no? Lilia seems suspicious, but I doubt he would have pranked the whole campus, so that only leaves Apple. But handing out apples isn't a crime, right? So who was it in the end? According to our junior detective, it was none other than Apple. With more apples than he can eat or share with his dorm, Apple offered some of the produce to his fellow freshmen to use however they wished. While discussing how much everyone wanted at lunch, students around them kept hounding Apple to give them a share as well, but their approach was very rude and clearly not with any respect. You directed the freshmen to make an exit right before a fight could start, but while doing so, Apple got an idea of how to use his remaining apples. Apple used Ramshackle as a base of operations to make a potion that would cause anyone who consumed it to make funny animal noises instead of regular language. After dipping the apples into the potion, he and the other freshmen stored them in various places around the school, including Sam's shop. Apple even got Floyd to deliver the enchanted apples to the Mostra Lounge kitchen, where the outbreak would spread even farther. And Floyd didn't say anything because he thought it'd be funny to watch the school become a zoo. Since there were 2 batches of apples passed around, and Apple is known to be prideful of his apples' quality, no one had suspected that the fruits were the source of the outbreak. You only ratted Apple and the group out because Ace, Sebek, and Grim forgot which apples were enchanted and jinxed themselves as well. After witnessing the 3 yelling at each other in animal voices, you decided that their fun was over. Suffice to say, all of the freshmen were scolded by their house wardens and made to take care of the botanical garden, with Apple, as the mastermind, taking on more of the work and remedial lessons. Thank you, Soul K.C, for your lovely report, but it is time to move on to our next headline. NRC student accidentally hands house warden folder with stolen test answers, receives detention. One afternoon, a group of students were studying for an upcoming test in their dorm's lounge when one of the students began distracting his fellows with sly comments and boasts about their own success. While most ignored these statements, a few students became agitated and a verbal battle of wills ensued. The dorm's house warden, having heard the commotion, came over and asked to see the instigating students' assignments. They remarked that since this student had all this time to talk, they must have already completed their work, and the student readily gave their house warden their folder with the completed assignments. Or at least, that's what they thought they did. Instead, they had accidentally handed their house warden a folder containing all of the answers to the test their compatriots were studying for. Test answers that the head mage had reported stolen during the house warden meeting earlier that day. Punishment was dealt swiftly and mercilessly to the offender. Our suspects in this case are Ace, who is known to take shortcuts with studying, Floyd, who doesn't really care to study, or Apple, who may have been so busy with etiquette lessons that he needed a little boost. Who done it? In this case, the culprit was none other than Ace. To try to keep themselves enrolled alongside Grim, the prefect had bribed the dire beast into studying by promising him a can of fancy tuna if he scored over an 80 on an upcoming test. In classic Grim fashion, the extra studying emboldened him to taunt Ace and Deuce about also beating them on the same test. Ace, unwilling to let Grim win but also unwilling to put in a lot of effort to study, decided to steal the test answers instead. He was so confident in his upcoming victory that he decided to rag on Deuce a little while Spade was studying. Riddle, seeking to resolve this juvenile conflict, asked Ace for his homework so he could confirm that it was done. These sorts of spot checks were somewhat common in Hartsville given Riddle's goal of ensuring his students didn't fail out of school, and since Ace was distracted, he handed Riddle the first folder he grabbed. The weight of a collar forming around his neck without the sound of an incantation caught the freshman off guard, so he turned around to question Riddle and was met with a rage so fiery and consuming it had rendered the house warden unable to speak. That was when Ace noticed the folder with the test answers and his life began flashing before his eyes. He received a 0 on the test and was given detention as punishment. Our next headline was submitted by Junior Detective Lily of the Valley 003, who was reporting on the story, Magical Mushroom Risotto Panics NRC. During lunch one day, anyone who grabbed the mushroom risotto in the cafe ended up turning into all sorts of different creatures. Panic ensued as sharks, deer, cows, sheep, walking mushrooms, squirrels, and so many more ran around the cafeteria. After some time had passed, the affected students went back to normal. It was later found that a specific student had made some magic mushroom risotto, specifically for the head mage, as a bit of revenge for all the chaos that had been happening to their friends. They had put the risotto in the cafeteria fridge where the staff ended up mistaking it for that day's lunch, serving it with all the other normal lunch dishes. The student was punished accordingly, and Head Mage Crowley started to question what he possibly could have done to make the student want to do this. Our suspects in this case are you, who has reason to have a vendetta against the head mage, Jade, who loves mushrooms, or Ortho, who may have wanted to do a little pranking. Who done it? All roads lead to Rome, and I think in this case, all the clues point to you. But let's see what our junior detective had to say. Shockingly, it was Ortho who caused this culinary conundrum. Ortho had noticed how many overblots there were, just how much stress he was dealing with, and how fed up the staff was with Crowley. He thought back to how his brother overblotted and how the campus had been in chaos so many times before. This brought Ortho to the delightful conclusion that if he was getting fed up, other students would be too, and maybe he could bring a little laughter to all those who had been stressed out due to the head mage. So he asked Jade for some of the magical mushrooms Jade had been cultivating. Ortho then turned these mushrooms into a risotto specifically for the head mage. However, he had used the cafeteria fridge to store it, which then resulted in the entire cafeteria ending up having some of the risotto. Ortho apologized for the chaos he caused, but not for his intentions. Thank you, Lily of the Valley Oath 03, for your lovely report. But it is now time to move on to our last headline. Classes disrupted at NRC by new conspiracy theory about their head mage. Recently, there have been whispers around NRC's campus allegedly claiming the head mage has a secret child. While the details of the story vary, the core of the rumor is the same, and the claims spread across campus so rapidly that many students have resorted to asking staff members to verify details. Staff have understandably been shocked at these sudden accusations, and as a result, their classes have become derailed. Some students have even started to use questions regarding the rumor to prevent their professors from assigning homework. Due to the implications of this story and its active effect on campus, the head mage ordered a school-wide assembly to debunk the claims and find the person responsible for spreading it in the first place. No one took responsibility for this theory, but the investigative bureau has narrowed it down to 3 suspects. Our first is Azul, who may have some additional blackmail material on the head mage and who, perhaps, needed to nudge the bird to achieve some other goal and perhaps let something slip. Second is Jamil, who may have been a bit jaded due to the head mage's alleged accepting of bribes and allowing a certain house warden to maintain his position despite his negligence. And our third suspect is Lilia, who has lived long enough and seen enough to perhaps run into a young Crowley, and who is old enough to perhaps have forgotten that detail and assumed his memory was more recent than it was. In a Florida Man first, we're leaving the fate of this story in the capable hands of you, lovely viewers. Comment who you think started this rumor down below, and while you're there, you should let me know how many of these stories you got right, wrong, and any other thoughts you have. If comments aren't your thing, you can always like and subscribe instead to show your support. And if you feel particularly inspired to submit your own story to potentially be included in a future installment, the form is linked in the description. Now then, before you go, I just have to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.